From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, a weekly show for basketball gamers and hardcore hoopheads. This is episode 583. I'm Andrew No Forum, Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. I'm joined as always by my co-host Derek, DV3 in the forum, and DV3G and DV384 on X. Derek, the NBA Finals are here, the season is almost over, we have some thoughts on the 2025 campaign, so please, tip us off.
Yeah, so this entire episode is centered around the NBA season that is about to come to an end, but also an enhanced focus on this year's NBA Finals. We'll be talking about that quite a bit, and the community weighed in as well. So, Andrew, you know my thoughts on the current NBA product. You know my thoughts on the NBA Finals. We've talked about it off air, but I asked the community, I said, what are your thoughts about this year's NBA Finals? I stated, interested? You're watching? Are you neutral? May catch a couple games, or not interested? And there's two teams that you don't care about. And kind of got a mixed bag of responses. But before we get to those, I wanted to get your thoughts on this year's NBA Finals. Are you tuning in? Did you watch game one? Are you interested in these two teams? Are you interested in the brand of basketball that they're bringing forward? Do the players intrigue you? Are you going to watch these NBA Finals because the players intrigue you, etc.? So what do you think?
Well, for me, I'm kind of between neutral and interested. I did watch game one. I enjoyed seeing the Pacers come back and win that game from 15 down. Tyrese Haliburton hitting that great shot from mid-range. Mid-range is not dead, just throwing it out there. A lot of people have been saying that, and rightfully so. Seeing him hit that game-winning shot, another clutch performance for Haliburton there. What the Hally, and all that stuff that's going on. I'm not a fan of either team. I don't dislike either team, or really dislike the players, or really like the players either. That is to say, they're neither my least favourite or favourite players or teams, so I can remain fairly neutral as far as who I want to win. Not really cheering for anyone, just hoping to see some good basketball. I do like the way the Pacers play, the defense that they've been playing in the playoffs, the heart they've shown. Some of the shooting performances in their comeback victories have been exciting to watch. So I did enjoy watching game one. It didn't have some of the things that really bother me about the modern NBA. Really bad three-point attempts, too many three-point attempts that are ill-advised. Both teams were playing some great defense. I did enjoy game one. That being said, I did come in halfway through the game when the Pacers were trailing, but I thought, well, they have made a couple of big comebacks this postseason, might happen again, so I stuck around and watched, and I'm glad I did because it did turn out to be an exciting finish. But if I do miss a game, I'm not going to be heartbroken about it. If the result gets spoiled for me, I'm not going to be too heartbroken. I'll go and watch some highlights if I hear that it was a good game, see some of the best plays. Certainly if there was another clutch performance as there was in game one, maybe I'll watch the replay, the last few minutes of the replay or whatever. So yeah, I will be tuning in, and I did enjoy game one. And I'm also not turned off by the fact that these are two smaller market teams. That doesn't bother me. I mean, I am a fan of a big market team in the Chicago Bulls. That is the team that I would love to see succeed. Not happening anytime soon, unfortunately. But you know me, Derek, I'm not the kind of fan that will say, oh, LeBron's not playing. Oh, Steph Curry's not playing. Oh, it's not a big enough market. I refuse to watch anyone but the biggest market players and teams. So I'm not that kind of fan. So that doesn't turn me off these finals. Any relative disinterest I have in the finals stems more from not loving the modern NBA, but I did enjoy game one, as I said, and I can watch it kind of unbiased, kind of neutral. I'm happy with either team winning, quite frankly, or I'm certainly not going to be upset with either team winning. I'm just hoping for some good basketball. But with that being said, as much as I did enjoy game one, not as locked in or as invested as previous finals.
Yeah, so I didn't watch, and I will not be watching any of the games in this year's NBA Finals. And the main reason is because I don't like this NBA product. I don't like the way basketball is being played on the floor. Even looking at the box score on this game, about 73s went up. And while both teams shot a good percentage overall, that's 40 missed threes. Like you stated, you were watching, and there were some bad threes going up. I'm guessing early in the shot clock pretty often. There was 43 turnovers. Just when I watch today's NBA product, and this game appears to be no different going by the box score. I just see a brand of basketball that I have absolutely no interest in, right? So while I'm not going to force myself to watch a brand of basketball that I don't have interest in, and these two teams I also don't have an attachment to. I'm not a fan of Halliburton. His game doesn't intrigue me. I'm not inspired by Tyrese Halliburton. On OKC, SGA, he can put up a lot of points, but I don't like the way he approaches the game. I don't like the way he plays basketball. I do like the fact that he attacks the mid-range, but there's the constant flopping and the faces that he makes whenever there's a defender near him, and the constant ref baiting. It reminds me of all the reasons why I just couldn't stand watching James Harden. And, James Harden also had other aspects of his game that drove me absolutely nuts, just like dominating the ball and dribble fitting at the top of the key, just constantly like over dribbling and oftentimes dribbling into defense and making things tougher and taking bad shots, etc. And I'm not a fan really overall of Chet Holmgren's game either. I think that these two teams just for me are just blah overall, and I'm just not a fan of the brand of basketball. With that being said, I have no problem with two small market teams being in a championship game. They're there. They earned it. They stood out as the two best teams for their conferences. And there's a reason that they're there. So that part doesn't bother me. I will state that Game 1 of the 2025 NBA Finals between the Indiana Pacers and the Oklahoma City Thunder averaged 8.91 million views on ABC. This makes it the least watched Game 1 of the NBA Finals since Nielsen began tracking in 1988, excluding 2020 and 2021. So I think that one of the biggest reasons that viewership is down so much isn't as much the two teams. I think a lot of it does have to do with just fatigue about today's NBA product, just the style, the lack of strong promotion. We talked about the lack of NBA Finals promotion, the lack of championship trophy decals on the court, whether it's behind the logo or, inside the 3-point line. Apparently, from what I read, is that they didn't even show player introductions on ABC, right? And that was a huge part of it. Remember when the Bulls in the 90s were in the playoffs in the NBA Finals, and you heard the music and you saw the Jumbotron presentation and the excited PA announcer, and here comes the players and they're announcing them, and you get to see them get up from their chair and you see the motivated look on their face and all of that stuff. That was part of the lore, right? That was part of the pregame introductions and presentation that got everybody pumped for that upcoming event, because that's what it is. It's an event. It's supposed to be an extraordinary event.
The culmination of a season,
Right, and it's not presented that way. At FOS, the NBA reportedly removed the playoff decals from the floor in 2014 due to, quote, player safety, end quote. There were a lot of considerations taken into account in making this decision, including player safety, an NBA spokesman said in 2014 of removing the player decals. He goes on to say, we decided to remove the playoff logo from the court for a variety of reasons, including cleaning up the playing surface. That is just complete BS, Andrew. Look at the NBA Cup courts.
Yeah.
Those are the messiest courts and the most distracting courts that I've ever seen in basketball history.
It's prestigious NBA Cup.
Right. And then the whole cleaning up the playing surface. Yeah, that has absolutely nothing to do with it. What they're cleaning up the playing surface for more advertisements, right? The advertisements won't, affect player safety, but a damn trophy will, apparently.
Yeah.
Right. So it doesn't make any sense. Just the lore for the NBA and playoffs and the finals. They do a terrible job promoting it, terrible job with marketing, terrible job showing off the players that are out there and those teams. And it is a damn shame. So I will say this again, didn't watch game one. I'm not going to watch this year's NBA Finals. And it's really for the reasons that I mentioned. I've seen some comments that stated, if you're not watching this NBA Finals, you don't love basketball. Like, what? Like, I absolutely love basketball. My so much of my life is centered around the sport, but I'm not going to force myself to watch basketball that I don't enjoy. Right? There's a huge difference there, the huge distinction. And I'm not telling anybody else that they can't enjoy it. I want you to enjoy it. Right? I want you to enjoy these teams. I want you to get excited about the games. I want you to be able to nonstop talk about the games after they end with your friends, with your family, on social media, etc. I'm not telling you, like, don't enjoy it. I'm just telling you the reasons why I'm not watching.
Absolutely, and understandable reasons, because I share your frustration with the current style of play, the current product, if you will, and it has become a product in many ways. And it is very judgmental, elitist, gatekeeping to say, if you're not watching these finals, you don't love basketball. Now, if somebody who does enjoy the modern game, who has said, oh, I'm not watching these finals because they're not big enough names, not big enough markets, I might argue that that's a different story. That if your love of basketball is dependent only on certain promoted stars making the finals, then perhaps you're not as big of a fan as you claim to be. But that is not your argument. As you said, you have no argument as far as the size of the market. It's more about not being that fond of the teams or the players in this case, which is, again, another matter entirely. But
the basketball itself, like, that's the most important.
That is the main thing. That's the main thing, absolutely. And again, understandable. I will say that what I watched of Game 1, mostly watching that run in the second half, I did enjoy that basketball a bit more than certainly a lot of regular season games that I tried to watch this year, and we're going to talk about that as well. Obviously, I did enjoy the run the Pacers made, the defensive effort, the plays they were making, some of the big shots they were making. It was fun. Was it my absolute favourite game of all time? The greatest game of all time? Absolutely not. I did enjoy it for what it was, more than I've enjoyed other games this year. But to your point, they have done a horrible job of promoting these finals, promoting anyone outside of the league's favourites, or should I say ESPN's favourites, the media's favourites, the talking heads' favourites. The lack of introductions, the lack of overall pomp and circumstance, the lack of decals on the court, the way they talk about the game, the way they approach the coverage of the game, just doesn't make it seem like a big event. I will say Doris Burke and Richard Jefferson are terrible.
Everybody's calling for Doris Burke's head right now. I just want to point that out.
She was good as a sideline reporter in small doses, when she was just having a little bit of an interview, or when she was giving an insight here or there. But on the mic, all game long, don't care for her in NBA 2K, don't care for her in real life either, with the commentary she provides, the blatantly cheering for players as well, the bias on top of some of the wretched takes. Richard Jefferson is just bland. I don't particularly care for his takes either. The fact that they have me missing Mark Jackson is quite an accomplishment, quite frankly. And yeah, just not a fan of that at all. That is certainly a downside, and I absolutely agree with all of that criticism.
Yeah, I can't stand listening to either of them. Whenever I hear people like that, it just really makes me miss the days of Mike Fratello being on the mic, and Snapper Jones and Doug Collins and, even Marv Albert back then, because Marv Albert did a great job bringing the excitement.
Matt Kukas, yeah.
And whatnot. And I just think that real basketball strategy was discussed more, less favoritism. They really brought the excitement and really loved the product, the people that were commenting back then. I think that Doris Burke lectures too much. I think that she exaggerates a whole lot and to an incredible fault, actually. And I just don't think she adds anything to the coverage. Like, she doesn't add anything positive to the coverage. So, Andrew, before I get to the community responses, is the plan to, set aside time for you to, watch the rest of the games in this NBA Finals? And where would you rank this NBA Finals in relation to NBA Finals that you've watched in the past?
Well, I don't see it cracking the top 10, even if it is incredibly spectacular. Even if it goes to 7 thrilling games, I think it'll be pretty good. I'm hoping I'll enjoy that, and it'll be some good action, or as good as the action can be with the modern style, in my view anyway. But yeah, I don't see it ever cracking my top 10 favourites. I've got 6 Bulls championships, obviously, taking up 6 spots in my top 10, and then some other great finals as well that I've seen since then. Teams that I've not been a fan of, but I've been happy to see them win, or I've certainly appreciated their victory. So, yeah, I don't see it cracking the top 10. I think I will set time aside. I've certainly set reminders to let me know that the games are on, so I will try to catch them. Again, if I tune in late, or if I miss a game and have to catch up on some highlights or whatever, I'm not going to be heartbroken about that. Put it this way, if something else comes up that is going to take attention away, I'm not going to make excuses to watch these NBA finals. I'm not going to try and schedule life around them. You know, being self-employed, I have in the past sometimes scheduled some work around NBA finals that I wanted to watch when possible. Obviously, sometimes you do need to record the game if there is an urgent call out with for a customer or whatever. But yeah, I've got the reminders set, but if I do miss the game or have to catch up or just catch some highlights, I'll be happy with that.
I mean, I do want to point out that the teams and players matter. It's not about small market and nothing like that. There was a graphic that was shown between, Pacers and Knicks in 98, 99. And this was, roughly 27 years ago. And of course, that's the year that the Knicks made the NBA finals as a low seed. And, Patrick Ewing was hurt, so he didn't play in the finals. But they were showing a Pacers versus Knicks matchup. And of course, that was the Eastern Conference Finals this year. And you look at the names and the talents on those two teams, back at that time. That's my NBA, right? Like, that's what got me super excited. You look at the Knicks, and it's Allen Houston, Latrell Sprewell, Larry Johnson, and Patrick Ewing all in the starting lineup. And you got the feisty guards and Charlie Ward and Chris Childs and everything. And I love that Knicks team. So exciting to me, those players, the way they approach the game, all of that. And then, the Pacers, they're out there with Reggie Miller, and they have veteran Chris Mullin out there. Love seeing the vets out there, and he could still shoot the ball. He's still a double-figure scorer. And you got Jalen Rose, and you got 7'4" Rick Smits hitting those mid-range shots, hitting hook shots, doing things in the paint. And you got the rough and physical Dale Davis out there and whatnot. And I look at those teams, and I watch those teams on YouTube still, right? Like, I go back and watch those games. And then I look at today's product, and I look at those teams, the makeup of them, the talent and the personnel, and I'm like, what happened, right? Because I don't think that these teams are as good today. I don't think these players are as exciting, and obviously the presentation pales in comparison as well. But we go from Allen Houston, Latrell Sprewell, Larry Johnson, and Patrick Ewing to Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson, and I love Jalen Brunson as a player and whatnot, but I just don't know what happened to the NBA I loved, right? And I just wasn't a big fan of watching that Knicks team either. I'm not a fan of Karl Anthony Towns' game. I do like Jalen Brunson, and I love his game overall, and he's kind of a throwback player in a lot of ways. But yeah, same with this Pacers team. I'm just not feeling it. And a large portion of that has to do with the players carry themselves, the playing style, the lack of versatility in so many of the players' games as far as variety goes and whatnot. And that's just the way I see it. And I know you were probably having those feelings too when you saw those graphics and when you were looking back at, Knicks and Pacers teams from the 90s and whatnot that really brought it, right? And, they had so many interesting names and players. I'm guessing you had those feelings as well.
For sure. It doesn't feel like today's stars are larger than life, as they were back in the day, and as a bigger deal. And there are many reasons for that, from the style of play to the way that the league is promoted, and the discourse is really centered around just a couple of players. So there are many reasons for that. So yeah, as far as getting invested in the result, well, obviously Jordan's Bulls in the 90s is a very high bar for any future Bulls team to top. But as far as getting invested in a team winning, then nothing for me is going to come close to seeing the Bulls get back to the promised land. But over the years, I have been able to enjoy certain NBA finals because there's been a veteran I've wanted to see finally get a ring. Gary Payton with the Heat in 2006, for example. Being able to cheer against the Heat's Big Three and cheer on Dirk in the 2011 NBA Finals, things like that. There's been some storyline, something about the players in the finals, the teams and the players in the finals that I've been able to get invested in, that I've been able to cheer for one team or at least cheer against the other team, as the case may be, get emotionally invested somehow, and of course enjoying the style of play is what it ultimately comes down to. But having those subplots, the players that you can cheer for, get invested in, enjoy watching them play, is so important when you might otherwise be neutral. Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, NBA-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at NBA-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
So getting to the community responses, we'll start with Twitter. Emma F. states, totally interested. True fans should be excited. I just want to point out that when she says true fans should be excited, yeah, if you're a fan of this NBA product, and there are a lot of fans of this NBA product, this brand of basketball, oftentimes these two teams and whatnot, yeah, you should be excited, right? Like, I want you to be excited. But it's not going to be the case with everybody. You're a little bit more interested than I am, for example, Andrew, right? So, but you're not a big fan of today's NBA product either. Roger Ward, Live 01 Legend states, interested, despite seeing my Cavs come up short. I love seeing smaller market teams make it to the finals, and I appreciate each team's style of play. Both teams are well coached, play hard, and go deep into their benches. And that matters, right? The play hard piece, the true competition piece. We watch sport for true competition, right? Unless you're watching wrestling. No offense, Andrew, but we know there's a script there, right?
Exactly.
But like if we're watching football or baseball or basketball or soccer, etc., we want to see the teams play hard. We want to see them really go at it, and we want to see competitive hoops. So if you're seeing that, regardless of how many threes go up, regardless of how many turnovers are made, regardless of how many questionable decisions take place on the court, if you're seeing players play their hardest and you're seeing them really go at each other, and that gives you your fix because you love watching sport, then yes, that's awesome. And I'm glad that he's enjoying it.
For sure. And I will say once again that watching the second half of Game 1, I did feel that competitiveness was there, that effort was there, both sides of the ball, and it was great to see hard-nosed defense, some full-court press action going on in Game 1 there, Derek, from the Pacers. So I definitely appreciated that and enjoyed that. The style of play, still not ultimately to my liking, still not into it as much as previous generations of stars and styles of play, but yeah, I did appreciate the competitive nature of both teams in that game.
T. Gentry at Bucky T states, honestly, I'm enjoying watching Halliburton. He's actually from my state of Wisconsin, too. The Pacers are fun to watch. Siakam's finals experience is really helping that team also. Obviously, he won that title with Toronto alongside Kawhi Leonard and Kawhi Leonard's lone season out there. And, he does have that experience, and that is going to help him from a confidence standpoint and execution standpoint. And Bucky T and I usually agree on everything. I don't truly enjoy watching Tyrese Halliburton. I'm not a big fan of his game, but I think it's really cool that not only does he like watching Halliburton, but that he has that local connection. Halliburton's from his state of Wisconsin. So pretty cool connection there. And yeah, I hope he enjoys the rest of the finals.
Definitely. And I wouldn't say that I'm a huge fan of Halliburton, but I have enjoyed his run of clutch plays in these playoffs, and I also appreciate, again, that competitive nature, the fact that he is willing to step up and take the big shot, like a play of Jamal Murray. I enjoy Jamal Murray a little bit more, but I always admire players that have the heart and are willing to take on that responsibility, and make or miss, they want to be the ones to take the shot. So I do appreciate that.
Moving on to Discord, we did receive a couple responses from the community about this NBA Finals. Thundershack states, the ratings are mostly to do with viewership and not the quality of the event. I feel bad for anyone who likes basketball and missed game one. I understand where he's coming from, but again, I don't enjoy this brand of basketball. And like I stated, going by the box score, it was very much an extension of the regular season. The 43 turnovers, the 40 missed threes, the roughly 73s going up, etc. And again, I hope he gets everything he wants out of this NBA Finals. I hope he absolutely loves it. But between the on-court product, the players and teams that I'm not interested in, the presentation, I love basketball, but I probably wouldn't have enjoyed watching game one, regardless of, what, people have said about it, what I've heard about it, etc. QB1120 states, who comes up with ratings? I mean, game one was pretty exciting to watch. A nearly impossible comeback against a top team with a game winner. That's like something you see in a movie, but better. Vin talks about the removal of decals, like trophy decals, etc., for the NBA Finals off the court. He states, quote, we decided to remove the playoffs logo from the court for a variety of reasons, including cleaning up the playing surface, end quote. And he states, translation, more room for advertisements. And right, exactly. Yeah, I'm sure the playoff logo will cause a safety hazard, but not these advertisements.
It has been kind of nice to see the NBA Finals logo back on the court in recent years, but it just hasn't looked right with the presented by YouTube. That takes something away from it.
Shem God states, they really saw Michael Carter Williams slip on a decal during Iverson's jersey retirement, and the NBA said, nope, time for it to go. I also want to get your thoughts on this because you shared a little bit about it on Discord. Mike Breen says that Halliburton's mid-range game winner didn't meet the qualifications for his legendary bang call. And Mike Breen stated he saves it for threes. And you said it was silly. And I agree in the context of the discussion, but I mean, I guess it's for Mike Breen to decide, right? Because It's his call. He came up with it. And yeah, so I mean, I guess he can do what he wants with it.
I mean, yeah. I mean, he's absolutely entitled to have whatever criteria he wants. I do think it's a bit silly that it's restricted only to threes. I mean, I think back to Marv Albert's famous yes, and that could be applied to so many plays, a game-winning shot or a great shot in the middle of a run. So to me, that makes it a better call, a more versatile call. I suppose I can't argue that Mike Breen sets his own criteria for what constitutes a bang. What a weird way of putting that, I know. But I don't know. As I said, it just struck me as a little bit silly that it can only apply to a three-pointer, that he doesn't have an equivalent call or that he can't repurpose that famous call for a big shot like this. I don't know. Just a bit silly.
He needed to come up with a different word, I guess.
Boom.
Right?
Just for mid-range. You can have bang and boom. How about that?
Winners. Bang and boom. There you go. So, Andrew, I believe we also received a response on Facebook.
Yeah, Keisto, the proud father, said not interested with the red dot. And yeah, obviously, Derek, a lot of people, I think, do share your disinterest in the finals. And I'm kind of surprised that I'm as into it as I am. And I'm not, as I say, so into it that I couldn't bear to miss a game or only watch half a game or catch some highlights afterwards and see what I missed. But yeah, having not enjoyed the modern style of play for quite a few seasons now, yeah, I totally get not being into the finals.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a distinction made, though, for the people that state if you don't like game one of the NBA Finals, you don't like basketball. Or you don't like basketball if you can't get invested in today's NBA product. Or if you're not watching today's NBA product, you can't possibly like basketball. You got to understand there are a lot of people out there, just like me, who love basketball. I eat, breathe, sleep basketball. It takes up so much of my time. Lucky for me, my girlfriend puts up with that. I have two brothers that love basketball. We're constantly playing basketball video games. We're constantly watching classic games. I play in basketball leagues, all of that stuff. Basketball takes up a huge part of my life, and I absolutely love it. In fact, basketball takes up a very large portion of my life, and I love it so much, more than a lot of people who casually watch today's NBA, right? So, I want to make sure that distinction is known. just because you enjoyed watching game one of the NBA Finals, just because you enjoyed watching a regular season game in today's NBA, just because there was a game winner in it, just because something, exciting happened in it to you, doesn't mean that somebody else who loves basketball isn't going to be turned off by that game.
Indeed.
Turned off by that product and whatnot. So that's very important to note.
Oh, for sure. And like I said, the people who are complaining about the size of the market, that, such and such didn't make the finals, so the finals are worth nothing or whatever, that is a little bit superficial. But if you don't like the style of play of the teams or just have no interest in the teams, like you said, you're not saying they don't deserve to be there, that, you cancel the finals if you don't get big enough stars or whatever. You're not suggesting anything crazy like that. You're just not invested in these teams or the style of play.
Right. It could be any two teams, Andrew. That's the point. And I've said this before on other shows. It doesn't matter what two NBA teams are in the NBA Finals this year. I would not be watching.
You said last year, right? With the Celtics, you weren't a big fan of that series.
I didn't watch it. No, I didn't watch the Celtics.
That's your team. Traditionally, that's your team,
Yeah. Traditionally, right. So, that's the point that I'm trying to make is it has nothing to do with small market teams. It has to do with the on-court product and not being invested or inspired or anything by what's going on in the NBA today, between the lines, the players and teams, all of that. So, it has nothing to do with that. So, Andrew, we're going to end the show with the second community question, which was, basketball fans, what grade would you give this NBA season? Examples: A+, quality basketball and deep league; C+, average basketball and average depth; or F, poor brand of basketball and watered down league. And again, those were just examples. People could give whatever grade that they wanted. For me, I'm not going to give it a grade, to be honest with you. I'm just going to state that I believe that the league looks very watered down. But I don't think there's very many interesting teams. I think so many of the teams play similar today. I just, each game that I've actually checked out looks so similar in style. It looks like each team is following a very similar pattern, and I just see so many bad decisions made, so many bad shots go up, and I can't get invested in today's NBA product. It's not just today's NBA product. I couldn't get invested in March Madness and college basketball. Just the style of play and overall approach to the game just kind of bummed me out, etc. So I'm not going to give it a grade, but I am going to say that, it was very hard to watch any of the NBA season for me. Now, you watched a little bit more, so you might have a different take.
Well, I don't know. I kind of tuned out at different parts of the year, and I completely skipped the All-Star game. I just cannot watch the All-Star game, or the abomination that it was this year. 3.5 hours of ads and half an hour of basketball or something like that, whatever ridiculous ratio that was. So I didn't even bother, and clearly didn't miss much either. And next year they're going with Team World versus Team USA, and maybe the format change will work this time around, but I think it is an underlying issue with the culture and a lack of competitiveness in the All-Star game. So I don't know if we're ever going to get that back, no matter how many formats Adam Silver cares to try out. And it was disappointing for me because I did enter this season wanting to be more open-minded. If you go back to the show that we recorded as the season was tipping off, we were talking about approaching it with more optimism, trying to watch as many games as possible. And I did give it a go, but I just couldn't get into it during the regular season because of the style of play. I'm hesitant to give it a grade as well, probably somewhere between a C- and a D+ at best, because there were some moments that I enjoyed here and there. Some of the playoff games I've had some fun watching, some of the better playoff games, and some of the comeback victories and highlights from the playoffs have been a bit better than the regular season. Again, it's a shame. Back in the day, nobody was complaining that the regular season was too long. This isn't a big enough matchup. We wanted to watch as much basketball as possible, see different players from around the league, stars, and even some of the role players as well. We wanted to see those underdog teams and see some players that we didn't get to see very often when they were shown on national television. International television, in my case, it was exciting. You get to see somebody different for a change. So that is all gone, unfortunately. I didn't watch as much as I was hoping and intending to, and there's a reason for that. We talked about missing 73s in a game, in an early season game between the Bulls and the Hornets. that was a horrible game to watch. Turned that one off, actually, halfway through, or three-quarters of the way through. Just couldn't make it to the end. Too many games like that this year. Disappointing because, like you, I love basketball, and I wanted to give it an honest go this year, and kind of like NBA 2K25, Derek. But like NBA 2K25, with the modern NBA, I found myself returning to the classics, old favorites.
So getting to the community responses, because there were quite a few, and I think this is interesting because there's more positive reception overall about this season's NBA Finals, Andrew, than the regular season and earlier playoffs itself. Bill Lime 2002 gives the NBA season in totality a D. He states too many injuries in the playoffs, but also too much load management, questionable coach sackings, boring all-star weekend, too much catering to offense to the detriment of the defense. He states on the other side, very skilled young players and no clear favorite for the 2025 chip. I think this draft class was a huge bummer. I mean, young players obviously doesn't need to represent like the rookie class. That can also just mean young players throughout the league that have been in the league now for a few years and kind of grown into a role and who are showing out and whatnot. I agree with many of his points here. He states too many injuries in the playoffs. Obviously, that's a killer, and that's been an issue in a big way for the last 7 or 8 years. He states too much load management. And yeah, during the NBA season, boy, is it frustrating, right? Key role players constantly missing, star players missing. It sucks for the fans who try to go to the games. It sucks for the fans who try to watch on TV. It sucks for the fans in general, and it sucks for those teams' chances as well. And I stated on a prior show, it's very rare for a player now to, a key player, to play 70 games, right? Sometimes it's very rare for certain players to hit 60 or 65 and whatnot. They're missing a whole lot of games, and sometimes it's for mysterious reasons. Sometimes it's for a BS injury that they just throw on the report in order to give that player rest and find an excuse to do so. So I definitely agree there. We already talked about All-Star Weekend, no passion there, no pride there, no competitive nature to the All-Star game. It really is a mockery of that event in the sport, and it's kind of pissing on the fans, to be completely honest with you, and I hate it. Catering too much of the offense to the detriment of the defense, that's obviously still a thing, unless you're Steph Curry, where you're allowed to be held all over the court all the time, and they don't call anything. Just like Ime Udoka stated in the huddle during the playoffs, he goes, don't worry about the grabbing and holding. They're not going to call anything. And they were just holding Steph through that whole series. I did watch a lot of highlights from that one, and man, he gets treated differently, Andrew, than any other player in the league. But overall, the offense is heavily favored by the rules, the gather step, oftentimes allowing 3 steps, whether they like to admit it or not, step backs from a standstill position, all of that stuff that's allowed. But no, the defense, you got to be hands off. You got to let that player have his space and freedom of movement. So yeah, that is also, a detriment to the current product. And he states questionable coach sackings. I mean, a lot of people have pointed it out. How does Tom Thibodeau get the Knicks so far? The furthest they've been since 98, 99, as far as, the Knicks are concerned. And he gets canned, right? And then Doc Rivers still has a job after the terrible job that he's done ever since taking over for Adrian Griffin in Milwaukee. I think the coach sackings are ridiculous. I think that oftentimes there's no rhyme or reason why a coach got fired, at least on the surface level and whatnot. And it's just weird to me.
It does seem like there's a lot of power plays behind the scenes and some really bad decisions and scapegoating, obviously. And that's often been the case with coaches. Can't fire all the players, but you can fire the coach, obviously. So that has been a thing in the NBA for years, but some very weird ones this year. And also, again, the suggestions of power play behind the scenes.
Roger Ward, Live 01 legend, states, C+, more parity recently. We've had different champions for several years now. The regular season basketball is ass for many reasons. We've discussed here before. He states no vets, AAU-style basketball, constant whining about fouls. He states the level of intensity in the playoffs is far superior. And I do see that. I do see people's comments, about the playoffs overall. They're enjoying the action a lot more than the regular season. And like you and I talked about before, the regular season used to be an event, Andrew. Used to be a big deal growing up. And,
roller coaster.
National televised games back then were like must-see TV for regular season, right? Most of the time. And just the presentation rocked, the storylines rocked. They did such a good job of promoting it. And now the NBA season, it just feels like an afterthought in today's game.
There's an account on X, NBA 90s, which, as the handle would suggest, posts highlights and other clips and things from the 90s, and will often post the intros and promos for games and nationally televised games and things like that. And it reminds you of how much they used to hype up everyone in the league. And with NBA on NBC coming back, they've talked about bringing back some of that pomp and circumstance, the intros before games and those promos. And look, it's not going to change some of my opinions about the style of play and other issues with the modern game. That's only going to come about when that philosophy changes league-wide, obviously. But I absolutely think that with NBC getting the NBA back, going back to the old NBA on NBC presentation and bringing back that philosophy of championing stars across the league and making everything feel like a big deal is absolutely the right way to go. Of course, you can't have load management ruining that. You can't have subpar product. You still need the product to deliver, so there are issues there. But yeah, I'm all for making it an event again and making it feel special.
I hope so. Just don't get Doris Burke on the mic, Richard Jefferson.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to have people discussing the game in the studio at halftime during the games and whatnot, get people who are going to talk strategy, who are going to talk about the game in the right way. The people that are going to bring the excitement.
So not Kendrick Perkins then?
Oh my God, I can't stand Kendrick Perkins. The whole era of Kendrick Perkins, Ryan Hollins, Gilbert Arenas, I can go on and on. Those people, having a voice and being constantly displayed on social media and just the horrendous takes, all of that stuff. I cannot wait for this era to be over. We're still in it, unfortunately, Andrew. But hopefully it ends someday. T Gentry at Bucky T states F with a red flag. He says it was boring. Funny how it got a little interesting during the playoffs this year, though, but nothing compares to the past time as far as regular season and playoffs. And we both agree with him there. Moving over to Discord, Juicy Shack Meat states, I'd probably give the season a flat C. It was generally a mediocre season for me due to the declining quality of the on-court product and increasing volume of noxious advertising. However, I didn't grade this an F only because of some entertaining playoff matches I followed, especially the East Finals and West First Round, and the Detroit Pistons' successful bounce back from the previous season. I know that he's a Detroit Pistons fan, and the Pistons season was a big deal for him because how they recovered and they became, a playoff team again after just an absolutely dreadful season last year. And he must be a big fan of Cade Cunningham and the things that they're doing over there. So I'm happy for him. Sham God states, remembered for the wrong reasons and the unpredictability. He goes on to say, when I'm seeing people talk about the decline of the game ratings-wise and ethical-wise, which kind of picked up when SGA's antics were noticed, it's a problem. And I agree with him about SGA and, in prior James Harden and whatnot, and players that do that. That play style is dreadful to watch. The constant foul baiting, the constant you can't breathe on a guy, the wrapping your arm up in the defender's arm and flailing in order to try to make it look like a foul, all of that stuff. I don't think that crap belongs in the game. And I don't think if you're a true competitor, you pull that crap, right? And I don't think that you approach the game in that way if, you really want to beat your opponent. I think it's BS. And I think I don't think they want the league stars to look like that. I don't think they like that play style. I think it's hard to look up to a player that plays like that. I don't think that crap belongs in the game.
Totally agree. And there is a difference between players who create contact and draw fouls with savvy play as opposed to foul merchants. And I've seen several posts on X pointing out the difference to people who are trying to what about the time Michael Jordan had 17 free throws, and they show the footage of him being hammered and actually being fouled and not flopping, and not just MJ but other players as well who have had high free throw games. It happens from time to time when there is a physical game, when you do have a scorer that is aggressive, taking it inside and legitimately drawing the contact. But I will say, Derek, that some of the foul merchant antics that we've seen this season actually make me appreciate Paul Pierce's pivot into the defender after the pump fake and draw the foul that way. That now looks positively quaint. That looks legit compared to what we see nowadays.
I think that's different, right? Because I think what happens with that is when the reason the defender is jumping in that case is because you're a damn good shooter, right? You threw a pump fake in a spot. Yeah, you threw a pump fake in a spot where you're normally going to make that shot. You sent that defender flying into the air. And, if you got away with leaning in to the defender, well, that's something that we've talked about for years needed to change, right? Because, if the defender's flying by you and you lean into him, you initiated that contact.
Yeah, that's a no call.
But if you actually go back and watch the footage, a lot of times when Paul Pierce did that, he would throw the up fake and the defender would be jumping forward, right? Yeah. And what Pierce would do is then go into his shooting motion because, that's a shot that he would normally take, and then he would get hammered. The ball would go towards the hoop, oftentimes not hitting anything. But at the end of the day, the defender jumped into him. That's completely different than, the James Harden, SGA, and even Jalen Brunson, antics. And Jalen Brunson did it a few times in the playoffs. I saw footage of it where he wrapped his arms around the defender's arm and then flailed and whatnot. That is completely different. That is an unnatural play. That's trying to trick the refs. That's trying to, in a way, kind of cheat the game. And that drives me absolutely insane.
Oh yeah, there is a difference. And very quickly, one more response from Facebook. Once again, Keisto the Proud Father says F, poor brand of basketball and watered down league. So it's not just us, Derek, that feels this way.
Yeah, the watered down league piece, I think, is key here as well. I think that the league is younger than ever. I think that the players are as inexperienced as ever. As mentioned before, there's been a couple GMs that came out and stated that, some of these players are coming into the NBA and they need to be taught basketball basics, right? No way that should happen at the pro level. And I just think that the players are so young. Oftentimes they're not experienced in the right ways. There's just so many players with the same play style with no true upside and whatnot. The league lacks in, unique talents and whatnot. So I absolutely agree about the watered down piece. I think this league is incredibly watered down, and that contributes to the blahness of it for me.
And the issue of parity is brought up a couple of times, and it came up in our Discord a while back as well. What do people prefer, the parity or dominance and dynasties? Because people were getting sick of the Warriors and Cavs meeting 4 years in a row and things like that. That also affected ratings some years back. And for me, look, I enjoyed watching the Bulls dominate in the 90s, so I would be a hypocrite if I say that dynasties have no place in the sport, and who wants a dynasty? Because I certainly wanted a dynasty when my favorite team was a dynasty, so I'm not against them. And to me, it's a case of however it turns out. Sometimes you're going to have some more variety, some more parity. Other times you're going to have some back-to-back champions and teams always in the mix. If you go back through the decades, you have seen that ebb and flow, and sometimes teams always in the mix, sometimes new teams coming in, as the case may be, rising and falling. But yeah, I have kind of enjoyed seeing different champions every year. That's been novel, because it certainly is a change of pace from the same two teams making it 4 or 5 years in a row. So I have kind of enjoyed that. But at the same time, I don't think that parity actually represents a strong league with so many contenders where anything could happen, but kind of a case of parity in mediocrity. There isn't a really strong team that will emerge and can be strong year after year at the moment. There is no power in the league. There is a vacuum. That's why we have the parity. And while it is entertaining in a way, I don't think it's an indication of strength. And of course, parity doesn't necessarily mean strong. It just means that they're on an even playing field. But I don't think it's an elevated playing field. I think it's kind of some pretty good teams, and they're all kind of equally pretty good, but there's no great teams. And I do think we miss out on something by not having a couple of great teams contending every year. And there is something to be said for consistency and familiar faces and familiar lineups. But yeah, I don't hate the parity, but I don't think it's a sign of the league being in a golden era either.
Well, I also want to point something out. How are you supposed to have great teams, dynasties, stronger than average teams, when the majority of the star players are hurt, out, load management, teams aren't able to grow together, they're not able to spend enough time on the floor together, to make a true impact and run in the playoffs. That's part of the reason why we're having so many different teams in the NBA Finals and different champions and whatnot, is because think about all of the players, the key players in the NBA that just are out so often. Role players, like key role players, and stars. The Paul Georges of the world, the Kawhi Leonards, the Embiids, etc. Like, you could go on and on. Durant and whatnot. Like, these guys are not playing enough games during the regular season to truly make their team great in that season, right? And then the players that do end up coming back to play in the playoffs have not put in enough work and time in the regular season, and have not built the chemistry to be great in the playoffs. I think it's a league of mediocrity. I agree with you. And I think that load management, lack of experience, injuries, all of that stuff, constant coaching changes, recycling coaches, which is getting super old. How are these guys recycled just over and over and over again, sometimes in different spots and whatnot? And there's a lot of factors that contribute. But it's just really tough for me to get into this product, Andrew.
And all that load management, what has it accomplished at the end of the year? They haven't won the regular season games. They didn't get through to the finals, all those teams that were load managing. So what was it all for?
Exactly.
But yeah, that is our take on the 2025 season. We will see who ultimately wins the Larry O'Brien Trophy, of course, and I'm sure we'll comment on it. But once again, that is basically our take on this year's campaign. Thank you to everybody who responded to Derek's questions and shared your thoughts. And as always, Derek, we invite the conversation to continue on social media, in our Discord, and the forum.
Yeah, and lastly, again, we want you to enjoy the NBA Finals, right? Like, I hope you get into this. I hope that you get all the enjoyment you want out of it. I hope the games are epic for you. I hope it's a great conversation piece, whether you're talking to people at work, school, on social media. Like, we want you to love it. But just remember too that, it's not going to be for everybody. And that's where Andrew and I come in. And, there's a lot of people who are not fans of this current NBA product, the on-floor piece, the teams, players, etc. So we respect your enjoyment, but just also respect the fact that, there's going to be other people that just can't get invested in it.
And of course, Derek, where real basketball falls short, we always have video games.
Exactly. And, that's one of the ways my brothers and I get our fix, using classic teams on video games, NBA 2K19, 2K14, 2K13. Last night, my brother and I were playing NBA Live 2004, actually, and having a blast. You saw a highlight that I posted of Jordan posterizing two defenders on NBA Live 2000, etc. Yeah, I mean, I may not be watching the NBA Finals or the NBA season for the most part, but I'm getting my fix on the real hardwood, playing myself, the virtual hardwood, watching games on YouTube, watching highlights, putting highlights together, all of that stuff. So trust me, I'm getting my basketball fix.
And of course, we will continue to share those experiences with you. With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, thank you for tuning in, and please join us again next week and every week on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or wherever you listen to podcasts. In the meantime, make sure you're following us on social media. That's where you can get in touch with us and, of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So, Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
You can reach me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D43G and at D4384. I'm also on the NLSC, D43, and on YouTube, D43.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. The NLSC is on X, Facebook, and Blue Sky at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nb-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone!